we are live and ready, and we are back in the room. And at this moment in time, it is my absolute pleasure and honor, can I say that, John, to introduce John Perkins as our last speaker tonight. And it would be quite nice if I could actually find my write-up about John, but I know a lot about him anyway, because he was one of my first teachers. And you might not remember, but it was in Florida, long time ago. So it is really a rare opportunity to have the legendary John Perkins with us. He's an activist, an author of over 10 books, of course. The most famous one he wrote was, of course, the Confessions of an Economic Hitman. This is the one, really, you caused quite a stir, didn't you? And we might talk about this later on. So most of his books became bestsellers, and the last one was Touching the Jaguar, which we will talk about later on. And they sold over 2 million copies. So you can roughly imagine the work, the talent, the knowledge, the wisdom, the experience which lies behind all of this. You were a chief economist at a major consulting firm, and you advised the World Bank, the United Nations Fortune 500 Corporation, the US government, and other organizations. And of course, Confessions of an Economic Hitman, you tell the story how you worked in South America as a consultant, being involved in the oil, but we can maybe talk about that a little bit. And how you got together with the Shuar and other shamans and started to look into that and became an apprentice and had massive experiences, near-death experiences, initiations, trainings, and so on, and decided to change from what? Economic hitman to shaman and author? Is that roughly the idea? It's kind of a switch, but it's good. So I welcome with all my heart John Perkins, and I'm really grateful that you are here. And you will be speaking a bit about the current ecological and economical situation and how we can touch the jaguar, which is the idea of transforming our fears into actions. So maybe the idea to start off with, John, but I leave it up to you. But I thought if we start off with the idea that we are really in the middle of a climate crisis, we are in the middle of an ecological crisis, we are in the middle of a very transformational time. And you have been talking for quite a while about our economic system being a death economy, and that we need to change that into a life economy. And I'm wondering if we could use that in a way as a concept, as a basis, if you could talk about that a bit. Or if you want to start about something else, it's up to you. I thought
I think that's a good topic, Christa. I want to start by thanking Chief Phil Lane for that wonderful talk about the eagle and the condor, about the prophecies. We're in this incredible time right now that has been prophesized as a time of the potential for tremendous transformation. And the chanting that he did was very powerful and beautiful. So I just wanted to start by saying that. It was marvelous. Thank you, Chief. So yeah, my job as a chief economist or economic hitman back in the 70s was really to create what many economists today are referring to as a death economy. And this is an economic system that's built on the goal of maximizing short-term profits, regardless of the social and environmental costs, and maximizing short-term materialistic consumption for all of us. And that's a pretty new concept. Out of the 250,000 years or so that we've seen ourselves as human beings on this planet, almost all those years we were spent living in life economies like Indigenous people do. We all come from Indigenous backgrounds. It's only been within the last blink of an eye, which we could say maybe goes back 2,000 years, but really the real thing goes back to the last century. It's been going ever since World War II, this death economy. It's an economic system that's consuming itself into extinction. It's just plain not working. And we all know it. It is the cause of climate change, of income inequality, of much of the violence that goes on in the world, of racial discrimination, of so many of our problems that are really just symptoms of this death economy. And I have to say, it's not just an economic system. It's a governmental social system. It's a mindset, and we must change it and create a life economy. Now, a life economy is a system that's based on, instead of maximizing short-term profits, it's based on maximizing long-term benefits for people and planet, for all living creatures on this planet. And as the chief well knows, and as all of us really know in our hearts, this is a living planet. When we talk about life on this planet, that includes the rivers and the mountains. That includes everything. And so a life economy is about protecting and enhancing the long-term interests of all life. And, you know, I think it's fair to say that we have been heading in that direction. There has been tremendous progress recently. Before the pandemic, I was traveling around the world a great deal, speaking at many different kinds of venues, ranging from rock concerts to global international economic forums in Russia and China and elsewhere. And during the pandemic, I did a lot of it virtually. And everywhere, I find that people are waking up to the fact that we live on a very fragile space station, this Earth. And we humans are the pilots. We've been guiding this space station. We've been navigating it toward disaster. But we're the pilots, and we can change that, and we must change it. It's really time to change. The good news is that people around the world are waking up to it. There's a consciousness revolution. But you know, Christa, whenever there's a revolution, there's always pushback from the status quo.
Of course.
So the status quo has been pushing back very strongly. I think it's always important that revolutionaries, well, let's think of ourselves maybe as agents of change more than, you know, revolution has a violent connotation, although it shouldn't have to. But as agents of change, we know that when we get pushed back by the status quo, that gives us strength. It tells us that they know we're winning. They know we're a threat, so they're pushing hard against us. So we're at this incredible time now where we can really move into this life economy. And when I say we've been doing it, if you look at in recent years, the interest in the Green New Deal, in conscious capitalism, in benefit corporations and B corporations and local buying locally, and our tremendous interest in being sustainable and cutting back on fossil fuels, this consciousness has been really growing. And now it's time to turn all of that into very deep actions, and actions that each and every one of us can take in our own way. So I think this is an incredibly exciting time. It is the time that's been prophesized by Indigenous people around the world, whether it's the Eagle and the Condor prophecy of the Americas, the Himalayan prophecy of the 14th Dalai Lama, or the Mayan prophecy of 2012. There's a Jewish prophecy, there's a Hindu prophecy, there's a Christian prophecy of the second millennium. There's so many prophecies that lead us to this conclusion that we've entered a time for the potential for change. But every one of those prophecies is just a prophecy that says what can happen.
Yes.
It does. It says it can happen, but we humans must make it happen. It's not just automatically going to happen. The portal is open, and we need to enter into it, pass through that portal big time. And Christa, I think it's important to recognize that we need to do it with joy and bliss. We need to have fun doing it, because if we don't, we'll burn ourselves out. And there's been too much of that in the recent past, of people burning themselves out. So this is a time to enjoy passing through this portal. Like all tasks in life, there's aspects of it that require discipline, not quite as much fun. I love writing. But there's aspects of writing when I get into
Oh, that are hard work. Yeah.
yes, and it just plain hard work.
Yeah.
But overall, I love it. Yeah, you know that very
Yeah,
well.
I do. Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting, somebody said, if I can't dance at your revolution, I won't come along. And it's the same idea, isn't it? We need to bring some joy to it, which is sometimes difficult looking at the state of the world, no? And
Yes,
where we are. I wanted to come to that point because this is, I think, where lots of people who are more grounded in a shamanic, uh, earth-centered kind of spirituality differ a bit from the New Age, because the New Age stuff is quite often, oh, we have prophecies and it will happen anyway.
yeah,
And what you said makes so much sense to me. We have a part to play. We are not the crown of creation and we are not all powerful, but we are part of it. And if we don't play our part, it can go a different way.
exactly.
No?
You know, a number of years ago, I took a group of people to Ladakh, which
Yeah,
used to be part of Tibet.
yeah.
And now, unlike most of Tibet, which is under Chinese control, Ladakh is an Indian protectorate. So the Dalai Lama is allowed there. And I was there with a group of about 33 people that I was leading there. And they came out of one of the Florida workshops, like which you participated in many years ago. And we'd been trying to get an interview with the Dalai Lama, who was in Ladakh, a private meeting with our 33 people, but it wasn't happening. Then on our last day, as we're sitting in the airport in Leh Ladakh, waiting for a very early morning flight, the Dalai Lama comes into the same airport with his entourage, and he's carrying my book, Shapeshifting, under his arm. So, I mean, you talk about coincidence, but somebody in our group had sent the book to him, so it wasn't entirely coincidence. But to make a long story short, we're on the same flight flying to Jammu, India, and the Dalai Lama invites me to sit next to him. And out of that time, when he and I sat together and talked, he then invited the whole group to come to his house, something we've been trying to make happen for a year. This happened, But what I'm getting at here is we're spending an afternoon in his house in Dharamsala, India. And one of the people asked him about prayer. There was a thing going around at that time that somebody was suggesting that everybody should take a certain time in the day to take 10 minutes to pray for peace all over the world. We should all pray for peace.
I remember.
And this person in our group, the Dalai Lama opened it to any questions anybody wanted to ask. This person said, "So, Your Holiness, what do you think of this idea of everybody around the world praying for peace?" And the Dalai Lama said, "Well, praying for peace is good. Meditation, visualization is good. It's important that we do that." But he said, if that's all you do, it's not enough. In fact, it's probably self-defeating. Because if you say, I prayed for peace, that's all I need to do, that's not it. He said, we must pray for peace, but every one of us also must every day we must take actions to make peace happen. So prayer combined with peace. So visualization or shamanic journey, whatever you want to do is really important, but you got to combine that with actions. And so this idea that the prophecies are going to happen without us doing anything is contrary to every spiritual teaching I know. All the spiritual teachings tell us, the golden rule: do unto others as you'd have others do unto you. Do. Don't just dream about others having a good life. Make it happen. Do it. So we combine those two, and I think that's very, very important. And I thank you for bringing that up, Christa.
But it's also not the other way around, isn't it? Because if we just do, then then our revolution will just lead to the same old, same old. So
That's
it
right.
has to be a combination of a kind of expanded consciousness where we do up here and then we do down here as well. We take concrete action. I think this is great because I think more and more people waking up to it, but it's a slow process at the moment because a lot of so-called spiritual people really thought that all they need to do is sit there and meditate, and it will happen. And I think this is, from a shamanic point of view, it's anyway not like this, isn't it? Because we are bridging the worlds.
Yes.
We work in both realms.
Yes. And, all the indigenous shamans that I worked with over the years, whether it's been in Asia or the Middle East or the Americas. They're farmers, they're workers. They don't just do spiritual, what we call spiritual aspect. They see the spiritual part as being important. In the Mayan culture of Central America, you can't become a shaman until you've grown corn. That's a saying. You've got to be able to grow corn before you can become a shaman. And I love that expression. So yes, we're human beings living on this planet, and we've got to walk our talk as well as live our dream and live our meditation, live our prayer.
Thank you. This is great. So coming to the idea of Touching the Jaguar, which was your last book, and which I really liked, those 4 levels. You remember you talked a lot about perception there, and the 4 levels of I don't remember exactly how you say of working in a way, isn't it? It's 4 different levels. So if you go there, because you know your book much better than I do, so why am I trying here? So it's basically about overcoming our fears, and you're using Indigenous people as an example, and you talk about a near-death experience as well. So go for it.
Well, this is, so I have this jaguar here to remind me to touch the jaguar. My first big experience with this, where I get that phrase from, was when I was a Peace Corps volunteer living in the Amazon with the Shuar people back in the late 60s, way back then. And I was very, very deep in the jungle, the Amazon rainforest, very, very deep. And I got very ill. I was dying. I couldn't keep any food down. I couldn't stand up, and I lost a lot of weight in a short period of time. I was 3 days from the nearest medical facility, including a day of incredibly difficult hiking through dense forest, and then 2 more days of riding in a terrible rickety old bus up winding roads to the top of the Andes Mountains, and then back down into a valley where there was a medical facility. There's no way I could do it. I couldn't stand up without help. But one night a shaman offered to heal me. And this is 1969. I didn't even know what a shaman was. I'd never heard of one. I graduated from business school. What's a shaman? But I wasn't in any position to refuse anybody who offered to help me. So that night he took me on this shamanic journey. And I'm in this trance state. And as I'm in this trance state, I've got my eyes closed, and I'm seeing this amorphous form in front of me moving around. And suddenly the shaman says, touch the jaguar. Well, I'm in the middle of the jungle, and it's the middle of the night. It's very dark. The only light is a small fire he's got. And I open my eyes and I look around like, where's the jaguar? Because there were a lot of jaguars around. I heard them at night, And he says, no, close your eyes and see the jaguar and touch it. So I closed my eyes, and this amorphous form shapeshifted into a jaguar. And I reached out in this visualization and touched it. And when I did, I heard my mother's voice that I realized that I heard every time I ate or drank stuff that the Shuar were giving me. So the foods in the Amazon are very unusual by my standards. People in the rainforest don't drink water because they know the rivers are polluted from organic matter, dead animals, dead trees, and so forth. The women make a kind of beer called chicha by chewing manioc root, and spitting it. And then you can put water in it because it turns into alcohol, and it purifies the water. They know that somehow. So, and you have to drink a lot of spit beer in the tropics because you have to rehydrate. And then strange foods, squirming white grubs that you take out of a dead tree, live and down the hatch, these sorts of things. Well, there weren't any Cliff Bars. There wasn't any bottled water. So I'm drinking a lot of spit beer and eating a lot of squirming white grubs and other things. And I realized on this trance state, this shamanic journey, that every time I ate or drank these things, I heard a voice like my mother saying, it'll kill you. And at the same time, I saw how incredibly robust and healthy the Shuar, the indigenous people I was living with, are. The men have, they're built like Tarzan. The women, I was in my early 20s, so women were looking really good. And then people live to be very old if they didn't die in a hunting accident or some early childhood disease or something. So I realized that as I touched that jaguar, I realized it wasn't the food and drink that was killing me. It was my mindset. It was my perception. And I was healthy after that. And the shaman later came to me and said, "Hey, you know, I cure you. You need to be my apprentice." That was the price I had to pay. Like I said, I had no interest. In 1969, there was no future in shamanism. and I didn't even know what a shaman was, but guy saved my life. But one of the first things he taught me was, he said, "You know, we have a saying here that if something scares you, like a jaguar, don't run from it. If you run from it, it'll chase you. Touch it. When you touch it, it transforms your fear, it changes your perception. It changes the way you look at the world and enables you to take actions that'll help you move out of this position that you're in." So when I touched my jaguar, I saw that, you know, it was a mindset, it was a perception that was making me sick. It wasn't the food and drink, because it was making these people healthy. And later, until I studied for several years a couple of years with him, and then later I studied with the Quechua shamans in the Andes, and then later in Iran, Egypt, and Indonesia, and many other places. And everywhere I went, I discovered that the common philosophy, a guiding principle of shamanism is perception. When we change perception, we change our values, and then we can change our actions, and then we change our lives or the lives of other people or the things or the planet at this point, the death economy. And you know, when you come right down to it, Christa, everything is perception. There are no, psychologists know this, psychotherapists, that's how quantum physicists know this. Businessmen know this. Marketing is all about perception. Politics is all about perception. When you come right down to it, you're in England, you're from Germany. There is no Germany, there is no England, there is no United States. There are no corporations, there are no religions, there's no culture except as we perceive them. And when enough people accept a perception or codify it into law, it has a huge impact on reality. And so what we're realizing now is we have this perception of maximizing short-term profits, short-term materialistic consumption that's destroying us. It's destroying life as we know it. It's created as a death economy. But it's easy to change that. All we have to do is change our perception to say that our goal is long-term benefits for people and nature. And that includes, you know, that's not just materialistic benefits, because benefits are spiritual also, and artistic, and all of these other aspects of what it means to be alive. It's not just about materialistic things. So I think we're in the process of doing that. Changing the perception will change everything. And as you mentioned, you know, things are moving slowly. They seem that way, but when you think of the fact we've been around for 250,000 years, a lot has happened in the last 5 years, and a lot has happened during the last 2 years of the pandemic, where we've realized that we have to change, and we can change, and believe it or not, we can even enjoy some of these changes. Conversation you and I are having now, you're in England, I'm on the west coast of the United States. Marvelous. And we get people, I don't know where the people that are on here with us are all coming from, but lots of different places.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, it's when I said slowly, I meant more, I'm admitting more people in as we speak. I meant more that if you look at the devastation we have created,
Yes,
we
yes.
should actually be able to see it, but many people still don't see it. That's what I meant more, that seems to be a slow process.
Yes. Well, and it is a slow process for us who are living at this point in time. It's taking a long, long time.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no question. If we put a historical perspective on it, though, we can see it as a little bit more long term. But in any case, we really need to be looking at how much more quickly we can move forward, because we know things are a horrible crisis right now. There's no question.
Because there is a kind of urgency, isn't there? I was listening to, just to throw that in, and then we come back to the idea of touching the jaguar. I was listening to an Aboriginal person from Australia, an Aboriginal person, and he said something quite interesting. He kind of said, it's all so complex, but what we can do and what we absolutely can do is to create containers so we can work towards what our intent can be there. And then at one point, it might just take over and run in the direction it needs to run. Because he was working a bit against this idea that humans are all powerful. It's so that nature has its own power.
Absolutely, yes.
And that we have a certain power. And of course, ideally, we work together. But as we are at such a crazy point, all we can do is work in the right direction and then hope it will kind of develop in a certain way. I don't know if I made myself clear. So with the Jaguar idea, so when you said, and you bring an example there of Indigenous people, what they do when they touch the Jaguar, when they feel the fear, what do they do when they understand they're actually frightened? And lots of us are frightened right now.
Well, here's an example. So it was back when I lived in the Amazon at the beginning, different clans of different tribes would periodically have battles with each other. It was mainly over land because they're hunters and gatherers, and they needed every family needs a lot of space. Hunters and gatherers need a lot of territory, and as the territories would get smaller, as populations grew and the outside world moved in, there was more of this. The enemy is my neighbor, and then they began to understand that the real enemy were the oil companies and the ones who were destroying the land around them. And so they reached out and touched the jaguar of their neighbor. And they said to the neighbor, hey, we used to try to kill each other, but now we got to come together to fight the common enemy, which is the oil companies. And they did. They banded together and they formed federations. They actually went out physically and blocked roads and did stuff like that. But they also brought in me and some nonprofits that I formed, like Dream Change and Pachamama Alliance, to help them win legal battles. But then they realized it's not really the oil companies. So they touched that another jaguar. Is it really the oil companies? No, it's the people who demand oil. It's you, it's us. And they said, so the only way to really save these rainforests is to change the dream of the modern world. In other words, to convert the death economy to a life economy. So those were a series of jaguars that they touched along these lines. And in the book Touching the Jaguar, I talk about a daily practice we can all do. And maybe I can summarize that for you in a little bit if you like, with questions.
Oh yeah, would be
great. 5 things everybody can ask. We can get into that. But I also wanted to address this issue that you had of human supremacy, this idea that we're supreme. And excuse me, in this last year, there's been a lot of discussion about white supremacy and so on and so forth. Of course, those discussions are very important, and we need to address those issues. Excuse me.
Oh, take time to have the.
I drank that coffee too fast. But I think most important of all is to recognize that we have had this attitude of human supremacy over nature, and that's got to end. We are not supreme. We may think that we are created in the image of God, or God is created in our image, but that's a pretty silly principle when you come right down to it. And I think something more important to look at is that we have become aliens on our own planet. So aliens, so we have defined ourselves recently as apart from, not a part of nature. Now, Indigenous people have always seen themselves as a part of nature, but we've defined ourselves in the last decades and maybe the last couple of centuries as apart from nature, above nature, supreme over nature. We've defined ourselves as aliens, apart from the world we live in. And if there were actually aliens up there hovering above us, threatening to attack us, we and the Chinese and the Indians and the Brazilians and everybody else would come together to fight the aliens. We need to recognize that we are the aliens. It's not human beings, it's our philosophy of life. It's our death economy. It's this idea of materialism. We need to recognize that we and the Chinese and the Russians and the Indians and everybody else, we all need to come together to fight this alien concept, this concept that's made us aliens from our planet. And that we're not supreme over it. We are the pilots. We have a special position because we have so much control over all the aspects of nature. That makes us stewards. It makes us pilots that have the responsibility of guiding the space station safely into the future.
Yeah, to the next and next and next generation. And this is an interesting thing you said, because you see, beyond all borders, beyond all political beliefs, beyond all religious beliefs, in one thing we are very united. We actually have separated. Sorry about this, there's something tech going on. We have separated from nature, and this is where we actually would have a unique chance to come together, wouldn't we?
Yes, I think
we need to shift this. This is bigger than everything else.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think, you know, years ago, a shaman lady in the high Andes, a Quechua woman, I took in a group to meet with her, and somebody asked her, how do we save the planet? And she laughed and she said, well, the planet's not in danger. We are. But she said, we're like so many fleas. And if we get to be too much of a nuisance, Pachamama, Mother Earth, will shake us all off. Yeah. And then she pointed up at this volcano in Babura that hovers over her house. This is in Ecuador. And she said, 20 years ago, that volcano was covered with an ice cap. It isn't anymore. The ice is gone. And the oceans are rising. Mother Nature, Pachamama, is twitching. She hasn't shaken us off yet, but she's sending us a warning. And she said, isn't it special that we humans can listen to that? We can get the message. We can listen. We need to listen and we need to act. Well, after that, Christa, every time there was a hurricane or another huge hurricane or big fires or floods or all the other once in 100-year events that seem to happen every year or so now, I was reminded of that. This is a message of Pachamama. We all know that these things are caused by global events now. They're not local events, they're caused globally. But we used to take them, or we've always taken them as local. So if I get hit by a hurricane and I survive it, I expect the outside world to come to my help, bring me water, food, etc., help me rebuild. But this pandemic now has shown us that there is no outside world, that we're all in this together. I think we should look at this pandemic as a gift, and that's not to negate or downplay all the suffering that people have gone through. I'm sure a lot of your listeners have gone through tremendously difficult experiences. And yet it's like a shamanic initiation, this pain and this crisis that it's created. And it's also taught us an amazing lesson, and that is that we are all here together. Every living creature on this planet has been impacted by this pandemic. And as I said earlier, we've also learned that we can change, and we can even enjoy some of those changes.
And can have a dance while we have the revolution. Yeah, I get we're on one level here. I want to come back to something, if you don't mind, about becoming. You said something about listening, and of course, I know Imbabura. I know that that mountain quite well. I have climbed it to my other. This way, I was much younger then, so it was easier. But we are not listening to nature, and I think that is another aspect of where we have so disconnected, that we only listen to our own head in our own voice in our own head. We don't listen anymore to something bigger and to nature, and we don't understand her properly. We actually don't understand the messages, because we got for a long time subtle messages for the last 30 years. And it's only now that we are getting them almost on a daily basis, you know, that we are starting to wake up. And even then, I mean, I don't know how it's in America, but here they still treat it as isolated incidents. It's
Yeah.
still kept separate in the news or so on. Yeah. So it's burning in Siberia, that's fine. And then a few days later, we have floods over there, but they kept separate as if they're not all together. Kind of the voice of Mother Nature saying very clearly, Oi, wake up, this is happening. So coming back to the Jaguar, and you said it's all perception. Is perception not something also where we need to begin to listen to other levels? Our perception is often habit.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, I think, the message that comes through with all of the attempts that this earth is making to wake us up, to shake us awake. The melting glaciers, the rising oceans, the fires, the hurricanes, and the pandemic is, come on, folks, wake up. And I think it's happening. I was not long ago teaching at an MBA program in China, and the young Chinese students in this MBA program, all of whom have been earmarked to be future leaders of China, they were getting it. They said something very interesting. They said, we Chinese have created an economic miracle. In the last, we had double-digit economic growth for more than 30 years. We brought 800 million people out of poverty. That's more than the whole rest of the world combined has done. But it's come at a terrible cost, environmentally and socially, and we've experienced it. We've been living in pollution. We've been living in terrible situations, but we've proven that we humans can create a miracle. And so now we, this future generation, we're going to create a green miracle. We're going to be the most environmentally and socially responsible country on the planet. I don't know whether that's going to happen or not. I hope they will. I hope we'll compete with them. I hope the British and the Germans and the Americans will all say, no, we're not going to let the Chinese be the best. We're going to have a World Cup in green. But I think that's a very good sign. And I hear something very similar often from students here, especially in business programs that back when Confessions of an Economic Hitman came out, and when I lectured at MBA programs in the United States, and I asked students what their goals were, it was always about money and power. But I don't hear that so much anymore. I hear that the new generation is waking up. So there is an awakening. And there's also this constant pushback. As an American, I like to look at I love history. I look at the American Revolution. It's said that when the American Revolution started in 1775, roughly 30% of the country was against the revolution. They were pro-British. They were what we call loyalists. 30% of the country didn't think about it. They just didn't even care. And only 30% of the country were the revolutionaries. But that changed over time, and yet it took some time for that to happen. I think we're in a situation kind of like that today, where a very large percentage of the human population doesn't even think about these things. In fact, if you happen to be poor in any major city in the world, or the majority of so many countries in what we call the lower income countries, you don't have the luxury to think about these things. But there's a small percentage of us, and hopefully it's a critical mass, or will soon become a critical mass, that really is thinking about this. And we can drive the future. And I see this happening, as you mentioned before, benefit corporations, B corporations, conscious capitalism, et cetera. It's a fascinating time that we're at, Christa, that I think you and I and everybody who's listening to this program, I ought to feel blessed to be alive at this time, where there's such crises and such opportunities for us to wake up and change things.
Yeah. And it's both, isn't it? It's a time of absolute potential, but also of peril. It really is both. Yes. And I think this is sometimes difficult for us as humans to hold that in one holder, that you said, yes, we are moving forward, but there's also the counter push, and so to hold all of this and still to stay there and say, yes, we are moving forward. We are in a time where we have all the possibility to move this in the right direction, to bring it back to a connectedness and change it into a life economy.
Right.
It's amazing in a way, no? Because the system has run its course, hasn't it? It has.
Let's hope so. Let's hope so. And I do believe that we each have a role to play in this.
Yeah.
And it's very important that we play that role.
Yeah, this is something people ask here, and I think, shall we bring in a few questions, or would you like to do, because you said you can show us something, how we can touch the Jaguar. Do you want to do that first?
Let me quickly do that.
That would be great.
People can, if they want to go into more detail, it's in the book, Touching the Jaguar, in more detail. But essentially what this revolves around is a practice you can do for 5 minutes every day or once a week for 10 minutes, whatever works, but on a regular basis. And it revolves around 5 questions. And the first question is, what do I want to do for the rest of my life? What will bring me the greatest satisfaction, the greatest bliss? And I'm going to provide a couple of examples. So I would answer that question by saying, I want to write. I love to write. I enjoy writing. I want to keep writing. I have a very good friend who's a carpenter, and his answer is, I want to work with my hands and wood. 2 very different aspects of being human. The second question is, how can I do this in a way that helps other people or helps the earth? Because we're all happier when we help the future, when we help others. And so I would answer that question as a writer. I want to write about things that help people better their lives, like Touching the Jaguar, like what I'm talking about right now, transforming a death economy to a life economy. My carpenter friend would say, I want to build things that are sustainable. I want to use sustainable materials. And then the third question is, well, what's stopping me? What's the jaguar that's holding me back? What's standing in the trail that keeps me from doing this? As a writer, I might say, well, I just don't have enough time during the day to write. I know I need to write every day, but I don't have enough time to write. And my carpenter friend would say, well, my clients don't want to pay the extra price for sustainable materials. How can I approach this with them? They don't interest them. And then the fourth question is, when you touch the jaguar, how does it change your perception to allow you to move forward? And for a writer who said, I don't have enough time to write, I'd say, well, you could get up half an hour earlier every morning and write, or you could watch an hour less of television 3 times a week and write. So you touch that jaguar. When my carpenter friend touches his jaguar, it tells him, hey, tell your clients that the extra price for sustainable materials is not a cost. It's an investment in the future for them and their children. This is an investment, just as though they were making an investment in sending their kids to school or something. And then the fifth question is, what actions do I take every day? And for a writer, it's, well, I cut back on television 3 hours a week and write, or I get up earlier and write, or whatever. And for my carpenter friend, as well, I go out and I build cabinets and I build houses using sustainable materials. But I also tell the people, I say, hey, listen, we're doing this way because it's an investment in the future for yourself and your children and your grandchildren. And every one of us, I don't care whether you're a carpenter or a plumber or a writer, a television personality, a parent, whatever you are, you can apply these things, these 5 things. What do I want to do for the rest of my life? What do I really want to do? What's my passion? What's my bliss? And how do I do that in a way that helps others? That's number 2. Number 3, what's holding me back? Number 4, when I really look at what's holding me back, how do I change the perception that allows me to move forward? And number 5, what actions do I take? And if you review that every morning for 5 minutes or several mornings a week, whatever, and you make that commitment to take those actions, we're going to change this world, and we're going to have fun doing it. Every one of us is going to be out there doing what we want to do. And again, we may have to do it. We have to clean house once in a while. We may have to do a few things we don't really want to do. Well, some people enjoy cleaning house. I shouldn't have said that, but we may have to do some editing that I don't enjoy sometimes. But that's part of the process. But the main thing is we get to devote ourselves to doing what really brings us bliss.
That is amazing. I love those. What do I really want to do? Yeah, with the rest of my life. Did I get that right? Okay.
Yes.
How would that help? How do I do it in a way that it helps other people? Yeah.
Right.
Number 3, what is stopping me? So that's my Jaguar. Is that right?
Right.
Yay. Okay, so when I touch that Jaguar, how does it change my perception? So what do I learn and how do I change it? And
Correct.
number 5 is, what action do I have to take?
Every day.
Every
Yes.
day, sorry.
Almost every day. You may miss a day once in a while. That's okay. But yeah, yeah,
This
regularly.
is really great. This is a wonderful kind of moment to stop, because I think we all got quite a bit out of that. And if we implement those 5, as you say, then it is for us who we have the luxury to do that and to go there and to go for it and then become a part of the change, don't we? While we do what we enjoy doing.
Exactly. Yes. And if we don't enjoy it, we're not going to be successful at it. We might make money at it, but we won't be happy. We won't be
Yeah.
successful. Yeah.
And we can't sustain it, can we? I mean, especially if the road goes bumpy.
Yeah.
We
No,
need to
that's
kind
it.
of love it in a way or enjoy it. Yeah.
Yes, yes. I've known so many people that have been involved in social and environmental movements that have gone from an aspect that they may believe in the movement, but they've gotten involved in some aspect of it that they really don't like to do.
Yeah, yeah.
And then they burn out. That doesn't work. So you got to do it in a way that ultimately brings you joy.
Yeah.
As as Joseph Campbell said, we've got to follow our bliss. If we don't follow our bliss,
Yeah.
what's the point? Why are we
Oh,
here?
absolutely, absolutely. And if we then can find out how our bliss can actually serve
Yeah.
humanity, as your point too,
And it's
you're
and
there.
incidentally that is the shaman's creed also. You know, the shamans are there to serve others
Yeah,
and but doing it in a way that brings them joy also, that brings them the lifestyle that they want to be in. Otherwise they wouldn't do it.
yeah. Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Okay, John. So are you, well, there come the thank yous. Amazing. Thank you, John. And you might see it happening here right now in the chat, of course. Now, have you got time for 1 or 2 questions?
Yes, certainly. We've got at
Are you
least 10
good with
minutes.
that?
Yeah.
I'll get Jonathan in. He might have found some. Or do you want me to do it, Jonathan? I'm happy. Meet Jonathan. He is the co-founder of Sacred Earth Activism together with me, and he has kept an eye on the questions, hopefully.
Hey, Jonathan.
Hopefully.
Hey there, John. Thank you so much for that. Yes, I've been keeping an eye on the chat, but been going wild there. There's been lots of fantastic kind of response and engagement to what you've been talking about. So thank you so much for the discussion that you've both had, for everything you've been sharing there, John, in that discussion. Just to grab some of the questions from the start, and I think you've sort of you've kind of delved onto this topic in what you just shared at the end there about the kind of the practices or the questions we can ask ourselves. But when you were asking or talking earlier to do with the perception and the shift in perception that we are needing culturally, there was a question from Satya asking what suggestions you can offer about how we can cultivate and grow a perception that sustains life. And I recognize that last practice kind of speaks to that. But I wondered if there was any more that you were able to say on that question, please.
Well, I think the simple answer is look to the long term. That's it. You know, make sure that what you do in life is oriented toward the long term. However you do that, and that it's not about just short-term gratification. Yes, we have to enjoy what we're doing, but we'll only really enjoy that if we know we're creating a better world and we're moving toward the long term. So with the examples that I just gave, as a writer, I want to write things that I hope will impact people in the long term. And as a carpenter, my friend is building things out of sustainable materials that he's looking to the long term as an investment in the future. And as parents, we look toward creating a long-term future for our children. What does that mean? And it shouldn't just mean, you know, getting them in good colleges or good schools. It goes way beyond that. How do we create a world that'll be meaningful once they graduate from those schools, assuming they do? So I think that, you know, we constantly look toward how do we do things that are making things better in the long term.
And that, you know, you talk about the short-termism there, and that brings back to what you were originally talking about to do with the death economy, of having that short-term focus, short-term gains, regardless of what the long-term impact was on that. That leads on then to another question that's in there, of kind of going in terms of, and this is, I guess, asking kind of the economist hat on, how do we reverse that death economy of extractivism and create new economic paradigms? How do we create those more sustainable paradigms?
Yeah,
In
great
1
question.
minute.
The life economy is an economic system that will pay people to clean up pollution. You know, come up with techniques for mining all this plastic floating around in the oceans and regenerate destroyed environments, to recycle, to come up with new technologies that don't ravage the earth. So we pay people, we create jobs. This is about jobs. This is about giving people the opportunity to make a good living while doing things that create a much better lifestyle on this planet for all of us, for all people. That was a brief. That was a brief. There's a longer version in Touching the Jaguar. People want to get it.
How to change the economy.
Yeah, Christa challenged you to keep it into a minute, and that was beautifully succinctly put.
Yep.
In terms of questions, so many thank yous coming in.
Yeah,
and
I think we're at the end anyway. Yeah.
Indeed.
Well, and I would suggest people can go to my website, johnperkins.org, sign up for my newsletter, which comes out once a month. I think there's one coming out today, actually. Pretty short, once a month. Join me on a trip to Guatemala, to the Mayan people, or to the Kogi of Colombia. I do trips every year to these people. So come join me. And that's all on my website.
I'm going to say something about it, because when I said jokingly that I met John, God knows how many years, we were still much younger then, kind of, sort of. And I did some training with him, and his trips are fantastic. And it's really, really worth it, because he's such an old, sorry about the word old, but such an experienced hand at it all, that you are absolutely in safe hands. So I'm putting the website into the John is,
I wanted my little Jaguar to come in and say goodbye to everybody too. And she's been listening to the whole thing down there on the floor, and that she lots of times likes to get in here and participate. Today she's being a little shy, but her name is Peggy.
Thank you ever so much, and love to the little Jaguar. Bye bye. Thank you, Jonathan, for coming in. Oh, gorgeous little Jaguar, somebody is saying.
Well, thank you guys for all that you're doing. I really, really appreciate you doing this. And please keep up your great work. And to everybody out there, follow your bliss. Follow your bliss.
We follow our bliss. And somebody's just there saying there, you won't love this. We need to stop flying so much, but I'll order your book. So she won't come to Mexico with you, but she will order your book.
Okay, great. Well, what I say to people on these trips, I always say, only come on these trips if you do a benefit cost analysis. It's going to create problems. You're going to fly, you're going to use jet fuel, but make a commitment that whatever you learn on these trips, you're going to go back and teach to lots of other people. So you're going to change the world. So, and that's my own guiding principle. I don't fly, I don't travel unless I think that it's actually going to bring benefits that are greater than the cost. Sometimes those things are hard to define, but we do, there is a price to all the things that we do. Every time we go for a walk, walking on the planet, what's the benefits, what's the cost, and make that comparison and then decide whether it's worth doing it or not.
Yeah, I think, and that's also a way of thinking. We need to practice more and more and more. Yeah, this is great. So thank you so much, John.
My pleasure. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.